Hi, we're here at Mi-Soul for yet another artist interview. We have South London girl done good, Natalie, aka the Floacist. Welcome along.
Thank you, thank you.
So I wanted to talk to you about your whole journey, because you've had quite an interesting journey. Because you didn't actually grow up in, well, you were born in Hong Kong, was it?
I was born in Germany.
Germany, okay.
I started school in Hong Kong. I did like 2.5 to 5.5 in Hong Kong. We actually moved to London and settled down when I was 7.
Okay.
So I did, in terms of schooling and everything, from 7 through I was here.
And how has that sort of influenced you, growing up in Germany and Hong Kong and stuff?
Majorly. I was in Germany literally for 13 days.
Okay.
So
you were literally born there and
Yeah,
out.
I was born there and out. Hong Kong for a few years. And before that, Peterborough, Arborfield. So living in England, but just, you know, army camp based and not in London. But it was great for me because I don't think, in hindsight, I don't think I'd have done too well with, I don't know, too much of a forced kind of monotheistic, patriarchal, there's only kind of one way, one story type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the movements are great for me. I remember making, you know, making the full moon in Hong Kong because it was the New Year coming and the celebrations that were had, and learning about the different, not just deities, but different energies, whether it be of the year, and that really worked well for me.
Yeah, because you're a very spiritual person in your music and as a person. So is that where that first came from, do you think?
I think in hindsight, that's definitely a part of it, that movement. So difference is normal, and the appreciation of all the different stories. I remember being my primary school in Thornton Heath, and Diwali, there was a Diwali celebration going on in our assembly, and I just remember seeing the rehearsal and thinking, how can I get those bells on my ankles? I need to be in this thing. I've only done nativity plays to this point. How do I get cast? Who do I need to see? You know, just enjoying and understanding more, and being able to meet Divine Feminine, do other things as well. So that type of travel was really good for me. And then it's got all of the other bits as well, which have been great for me as well. But I think it's been great to not only have one thing to go off of. I think I'd have been a really rebellious energy in that sense, more I think aggravated and more aggressive, just for having been funneled through something a bit too narrow for me.
And then growing up in South London and stuff,
Yes.
What was your sort of musical upbringing, if you like?
Oh gosh, there's a whole set of pictures where you can't get anything other than this from me. You know, that's just the whole David Bowie Eurythmics and you know, even Kate Bush, and just that whole era of sound that I was able to grow in the 80s, and everything from punk to, gosh, madness, my gosh, Adamant, you know, there's all that. And then there's also the identity music, I call it. So when we travelled, when we were in Hong Kong, Mum would set up the Reel to Reel, and we'd have Gregory Isaacs and Burning Spear and Alton Ellis and Bob Marley playing. And this music here was to do with identity and knowing self and understanding one's position in alignment, Rastafarian knowledge and understanding. So there's that. And then we used to live next door to my best friend, a Hindu family next door. So we used to get down with the drums. My brother used to have a sound clash. He'd be playing in the sound system.
Did you have family in sound systems as well?
Yeah, my brother had a sound system, CID sound, big up. Yeah, big. It was that was lovely growing up with that. You know, my mum was just and is just fantastic, and she just had this thing. She gave my brother basically the garage to just have. It was like a youth club actually. It was great. It was fantastic. My brother and all his friends in there. My sister. I'm the youngest of 3, so lots of music. My aunt. It was just a wealth of Sunsplash videos, about to say DVDs, they definitely weren't DVDs, and you know, 45s that were coming in all the time. My brother had a serious collection of music going on, and then yeah, you know, that's also sprinkled with some Prince. I remember Purple Rain playing a lot. My dad's occasional Nat King Cole moments.
So you had a very rich upbringing in music, lots of influences. But I understand, like originally, because your natural talent is lyrics. You're a lyricist, and you didn't necessarily think you would have a career in music. You were more sort of poet, is that right? And
Absolutely.
spoken word.
Yeah.
So how did that transition? How did you get from that into music? What happened?
It happened. My thing is words. You know, words sound power. Avid reader. Especially as a child, avid reader, and always writing and creating things, books, stories and such, poetry. Also a very kind of extrovert performance energy as well, so there was that, and I started to kind of funnel things through the idea of theatre. I went to the Brit Performing Arts School and studied performing arts theatre. But again, that kind of misogynistic, patriarchal mind concept of how many roles you've kind of got and being an actor. When I found performance poetry, it was just perfect for me, or when I was kind of led there, because I had all this writing. I used to write plays and things to kind of get around the feeling of just the characters available, you know. But when I got to performance poetry, it was great because it's a performance art on the stage, the spoken word. It's an ancient craft, but it's also dealing with the funneling and channeling of the message of kind of word that comes through. So how that turned into music is within the performance poetry. So I was in a poetry group, 3+1. Music's kind of been tagging and teasing them in my art class. Let it be known, in my art class. My music group, my first singing group started because we used to sing around the table. And suddenly I was invited into a group, Debonair, that was younger. But then when I left school, I went into performance poetry, and being in the spoken word circuit, the live music, there's usually kind of a band around. Unit 5 at the time used to play all the different things that we would do, and you find yourself interacting with music. You can say no music, or you can be involved in that type of vortex and jam. And it just really felt comfortable, it was enjoyable. There's something really, it's almost as though there's something to cope or to go with the vibration of the sound of word, and then you've got these other alignments. So I was into that study. I was looking at the percussive voice, the melodic voice, music. Why is it such an influence on people? What does it do? What's the alignment of it? And that was when I invited Marsha down to provide the melodic while I provide the percussive, to see what happens when you place them together and they happen simultaneously. So that was actually where my mind.
And that's really interesting you say that, because one of the things that I think you bring to all the music you've been involved in, apart from obviously lyrics, is a vibe. There's a certain vibe. So is that how that sort of comes through? Is that where that comes from?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's because I wasn't really trying to so much make music that this isn't, you know, although I stood in my mirror with a hairbrush before, but I wasn't doing that type of launch. It was more so a matter of the craft and the concept being as important as the melody, and therefore there is actually something that is there to be said, and there is actually a guide in the sense of I don't like to throw thoughts out too early and kind of whinge or use music that's going to be played by other people and really be out of your control or ability to explain what you really meant, or, you know, people could take things any way. So I tried to deal with solutionary aspects, so points of responsibility and ability to do. I'm not really, I find it difficult to listen to music that says, you know, I'll never breathe again, or I'll die without, and I can't do this, and then it's all, I don't know, because you didn't get a phone call back or something, you know. That doesn't motivate me, you know, it doesn't get me up and help me. And I know there's times I've put on music because I'm trying to figure out how to get to my next moment, not even, you know, what am I going to wear tonight, but literally move through. Might not have lyrics in it, might be instrumental, might be something that takes me back to when I was 3 years old, which gives me the end remember and get beyond, or whatever it is. So I take the responsibility of craft really highly, you know, and I think that may be how I end up at what it is that you were saying, that like the vibe is there's a thought process behind it, you know.
Because you can definitely feel it in the music, and it's obviously something quite unique to what you do. So you were saying you brought Marsha in, you hooked up with Marsha,
Yes.
And you, I guess, created Floetry together.
Yes.
Now what happened? Because when you got together, I mean, I remember at the time, a friend of mine said there's two girls from South London, they're incredibly talented, they're doing stuff with Michael Jackson, they're living in the States, and at that time, for a British artist, it was quite tough.
Yeah.
Now, there are lots of British artists breaking through, but at the time, because I was running a magazine at the time, and it was really, really difficult for a British artist to get any cut through. So not only were you having success working with Michael Jackson, but you were also being signed in the States, which was like unheard of. Like that just didn't happen. So how did that occur? What went on?
You know, it's funny because as hard as it was for black artists in the States, it was even harder for us here. Because I mean, I didn't even have it in mind to try and get signed here. It didn't even occur. I was doing my poetry jams and stuff. And even when I went to the States initially, when I took Floetry to the States, it was to do poetry shows. It wasn't, okay, now I think we've got this thing, let's go and do music, you know, let's go and meet with some labels. Never that, because I always thought that I wasn't necessarily what we were doing wasn't based on trying to get signed. It was actually the opposite of that. It was based on the craft. And you do that and then see what happens when you do that, when you offer something with an intention in that way.
So do you think that's a mistake a lot of artists do? Because a lot of artists just have this goal of being signed. That's the sort of the gold at the end of the rainbow, whereas what you were doing were focusing on your craft and what you were doing.
Yeah.
And as a consequence,
because I think it's like you know, just wanting to be married, but never working on yourself, and then getting married, and then things go crazy because you're living with this person, and and you haven't necessarily checked yourself, and are you ready for, or working on yourself, and then you may come across and meet somebody, and these things can occur, and they actually know you because you're being yourself at the time. You're not, you know. I think it's similar to that.
Yeah.
So, I don't really work for manifesting outcomes. I kind of more so deal with the stuff in between the A and B, because the outcomes, I think if you try to, it could turn you crazy trying to make it go there. So if I was trying, for instance, to win an Oscar, I might have possibly found a really weird, strange way of feeling like I was in the wrong place at the Grammys, which would be really sad for me to have an experience where I'm now saying, I never wanted to do music. I went to school to act. What is this? That would be, you know. So I think it takes you where it takes you. Certain things are predestined, and also there's so many other things at play. So as much as it was hard, I had a lunch with Jane from Loose Ends, and I found out way after Marsha had already gone solo. Floetry had ended at this point, where she let me know that, hanging on a line, that album was recorded in Philly, just down the road from where we recorded. And really and truly, the neo-soul movement, the godmother of it is Sade, really, Omar, Soul to Soul. Without these particular sounds, it's questionable as to how the neo-soul movement would have manifested in the States. So everything's kind of connected in its own way. I think sometimes being able to remove self from the subjective space and look a bit broader than just yourself, you can see how it's actually connected. So sometimes I get asked, you know, how did Floetry happen? Like, I'm going to say, well, my plan was this, and then I did this, and afterwards there's so much that is outside of your plan, you know. My dad used to say to me when I was younger, you have to have a plan in order to improvise. I like that. Because there's so much improvisation that occurs. There's so much that you can't claim. The Michael Jackson song, a song Marsha wrote, actually.
Were you actually involved in that, or?
I was involved in the process in the sense of I was involved in how we got to the States. I was involved in how we
Because I know you're not
came
credited
to
on the song.
Oh no, I didn't write that song. Marsha started writing that song when she was about 19,
Right.
and it was turned down by her publishers here. They said it sounded like an interlude.
Oops.
And then she actually recorded it as a part of the Floetry sessions when we were in the States and we were at A Touch of Jazz and we were recording what was Floetic. We recorded like 11 songs in 7 days, and then, you know, Marsha and Andre got a really cool creative relationship going, and they were just writing lots of different songs, some of which went to Glenn Lewis, the different songs that that they created together. And Butterflies was one of those songs, but it was on a bunch of songs on a CD that had a Floetry songs.
Right.
And when we were signed to DreamWorks, at first...
You obviously cut it yourselves as well, didn't you?
Well, we recorded everything at Touch of Jazz. All these songs are being recorded at Touch of Jazz, and Marsha's version is on Floetic.
Mm.
And that was the version that John McClane, when he had heard our stuff, he was playing Floetry in his car, and he just happens to be or was a very, very dear friend of Michael Jackson's, and they were actually in the car together, and he played it. He said, "What do you think of this song?" So on and so forth, and Michael said that he wanted to take the song. So when we were actually signing to Motown at the time, we were in the early stages.
So how did that come about? So you moved to the States, you were doing your thing, and obviously you met with Jazzy Jeff at some point. Where was the tipping point where you then ended up getting signed? And
it's all in a very short space of time. It's all very... when we get to A Touch of Jazz, Jill Scott's just finished her album, Music Soul Child's wrapping up, Bilal's kind of coming to the... We're right in the midst of... So people are coming to A Touch of Jazz because Jill's come out of A Touch of Jazz. You know, there's so many things that are going on. And we've at this point assigned our management to Jay Irving, and we've gone up into New York now. We're shopping now. We're shopping for a deal, which is very interesting. We went to the States in April of 2000 for 2 weeks. Went back, came back in July. We were signed in November, and we were in the studio with Michael Jackson in March.
wow,
So it literally...
that's fast.
Actually, when we signed to DreamWorks, we were in a bidding war because Motown wanted us first, and then John had heard everything over at DreamWorks, John McClane, and he came and said, "Listen, what could we do to entice you over to DreamWorks?" And we were like, "We're going to go to Motown," because for the worst reason, our manager's friend was A&R there. It's going to get you a good deal, isn't it? It's going to get him one. But anyway, we're going to go to Motown, and then John called back and said, "I want to play a message for you." And we were on speakerphone. John's in LA, and he plays the answer machine, and it's Michael Jackson. "Hey, I really love that song with those girls. The girls from the UK, Floetry. We should do this. What do we have to do?" So, you know, if you want to sign to DreamWorks, you know where to call. So
that helped with the decision a little
yeah,
bit.
which is funny because it's Motown. It's like, you want to sign to Motown, Jackson 5, Michael Jackson, you know, and then but you end up going to DreamWorks because Michael Jackson wants to do the song. Not that Michael Jackson said, "Go to DreamWorks and you could do this," but he really genuinely was interested in the song and was an absolute dream to work with. He was very open, had Marsha directing him do certain things, and was really interactive. It was lovely. Kept her vocals on the song. You know, it was very warm. Had us both in the studio. His children were there. It was a very nice, very, very nice. This experience happened before anything. There's no album out. There's no, you know, this is... We were in the cab. I remember we got to Sony and went to the desk, and I said, "Hi, yeah, it's Floetry for Michael Jackson session, please." You know, I don't even think we had enough money to eat at the hotel that we were staying at, but she was like, "Okay," you know, and we were in the lift, and they've done the keys, and we're going up with the security guard doesn't even come up; he has to let you in, and we got there, and the door, it said, "Michael Jackson, friends and family only." So maybe we're friends. You know, so I mean, this is all, it's
quite surreal.
very rapid. I remember my sister saying, "I'm not going to talk about it at work anymore, Nat, because I don't know if I believe someone who was telling me that these things were happening to their sister. It just doesn't, I'm going to go easy on talking about it because it was very rapid." Yeah.
Yeah, because I was saying, I remember at the time, a lot of people were talking about it and like, oh my God,
Yeah.
oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So that led to your first album, and that was hugely successful.
It did really well.
Lots of big tracks and stuff. One of the tracks I was going to ask you about was Say Yes, which is just stood the test of time. It still gets played. It's been remixed
Absolutely.
umpteen times, been made a house record.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that song.
Say Yes is a really, really amazing song, a real powerful song. The major constructs of that song, Marsha and Dre, were in the studio, and I remember I came back in and I heard the piece and was just like, this thing's crazy, and I added my parts to it, which actually got mixed up on the first record, which was very interesting, helped me to grow. But Say Yes is funny. When I actually come later on to make Floetry Rebirth, which was my second solo album, which was 10 years after the Floetic album had come out. It was my way of being able to really give a shout to where everything had started, and also I think I was 31 at the point. Was I 31? I was 21 when that song was made, and I thought it might be nice to, as a grown-up, say something too. But yeah, really strong song. A song that when Marsha explains it, she says that she had written it originally. They were doing sessions for other people. I can't remember who it was. She had written that for. There's a gentleman, R&B, big crooner. But it was again on that CD, Floetry songs, and everybody just was really addicted to it from its kind of first played. So really big song. We were able. That was our second single. We shot a video for that one, and
then other tracks on that album, Getting Late and Sunshine. Sunshine is quite an important song to you, I think.
Oh gosh, there's some really big songs on there. Sunshine, Headache, Mistress. I mean, if you do an actual Floetry show, interestingly enough, as much as Say Yes, of course, is one, I would say possibly the most memorable song off of that moment, you know, in a mainstream sense. If you have a real Floetry audience and you don't perform Sunshine, you might get in a bit of trouble. and Mistress, seriously, and Headache, and it goes, you know, Hey You. What was really great at that time is nobody knew, so nobody was trying to pretend that they knew what was happening. I mean, Sunshine, I had to fight for my second verse because it was like, you know, Marsh got 8, I got 8. Marsh and I weren't even talking at this time. It was quite interesting.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh, we're children, young, 21, 23, going to the States, all this stuff
the rush,
going on.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson's taken a song, so you can imagine all of this has come in there. So we were in whatever space we were in, and so we weren't even in communication. We were living in the same space, where she would go studio, I would go studio. And Sunshine, so she did 8, I did 8, and in the second verse, you know, Dre said, what do you need, Marsh? You need an 8. I said, I need a 16. No, songs don't go like that, Nat. You know, we write music, this is what we do. You don't do a 16, you have to do another 8. I said, no, this is what it needs, this is what the concept needs. And then all of this, because I was the theatre person, that was kind of out at the time. Natalie wasn't trying to do music. She's a theatre kid. And so yeah, I had to fight for that song a bit, but not for too long, because once it started to happen, everything was. But what was great about that time is we were creating. So Marsha and I had a lot of conversations, discussions. What did we hear? What did we see? Naming tracks and things like that, and moving around. At one point, we were working in 3 different rooms, so we'd pass each other in the corridor, like, that's called Headache. Okay, listen, there's something there, getting Nate, listen, I'll put a chorus down, and just literally moving, you know.
So do you think that sort of tension or creative tension helped with the process, or?
No, I think the creative tension ended up destroying the process, but right. I think that the lack of people trying to say what it's supposed to be, because this is what happens, you do something, no one knows, never heard that before, it sounds great, I really like it. Then when you go to do it the second time, people start saying, you should do this. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't want to seem like I'm saying to you, you can't tell me anything, because I love collaboration. Mm-hmm. But there's part of the way that thing was able to be what it is, was the fact that no one was trying to make it something. It was very organic. It was, like I say, we came in under the radar for a lot of creativity.
I think a lot of artists struggle with that, because a lot of artists' sophomore albums they always struggle with, because the process that got them to their first album has been an organic one, something they did themselves without influence, and then obviously on the second album lots of people get involved and often it doesn't work.
Yeah, spend a lot of money to owe more. and you know, I think that occurred with Floetry, although I've never made something that I'm not happy with, you know, but I think Flowology had so much pressure to create. There were so many minds in it, so many, you know, if we just do this and that. And it's funny because for me, you know, performance artist, performance poet, hearing, you know, we need to really make this thing cross over now. And, you know, Floetic, it was like 800,000
Yeah, I was going to say, that did very well
at that point. And I was thinking,
how much more crossover do you want?
What level of crossover are you talking about here? World domination? I don't know. Because I was very content. Because it's been a journey. It's been a longer journey than just that. But yeah, I think that when you get heady into the heady space, I think headiness always blocks creativity in some way, shape or form.
And the second album's a great album. Had Superstar, Let Me In. But one of my favourite tracks I want to ask you about is Imagination. That's definitely my favourite track on the album.
Imagination. We were in Southern California, going into the studio with Raphael Sadiq, which obviously was quite ironic, and it was raining. So the first thing I said as we walked into the studio was, "You lied." It does rain in Southern California. However, I love the song. We went in. It was a nice vibration. It was really great to be in with Raphael Sadiq. At this point, this is the label getting involved with who they think we should be working with. We were real happy with Dee and Keith from the original Touch Jazz crew, which had now disbanded. As I said, you know, wherever success falls, you see scatterings, and you know they've gone into something else, and then they're working in separate parts. Yeah, so the label was interested, and also John McCain's no longer with us. DreamWorks has folded. We're over at Geffen now, Interscope. Which was very interesting. And we worked with Raphael, and they also had Scott Storch come in for a couple of tracks too, which was Superstar, My Apology. So yeah, going in with Raphael was great. We had a really fantastic, chill, build, talk, share energy time. I had plenty of questions to ask or appreciation to share for Tony alone. So that was it was great. We chilled for quite a while, and he had some just geniuses in the studio with him, keys and bass and guitar, and it was real organic. Literally, there are so many things that we can do, Raphael. There's so many things that we could do. We should use our imagination.
Okay.
And this bass line was being played, and you know, just very organic and very, I think, the type of moment I wanted to have with Raphael. I mean, come on, you're going in with Raphael. Tony, what type of song do you want to make, you know? Like, that was like when we went in with Earth, Wind and Fire. I remember when I went into the booth. I thought we were just going to go in and write, but Philip Bailey, who'd sought us out, who's just so beautiful, he was saying, yeah, it's not a Floetry song, Floacist isn't it? You've got to talk at the beginning, we need to do something with 2 verses. And I remember getting into the booth and putting on the headphones and turning, and it's like Vadine, Maurice, and Philip, literally Earth, Wind and Fire. And
that was the Illumination album, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fantastic album.
I remember thinking, what do you say on an Earth, Wind and Fire song? You know, you can say whatever you like. There's no. So those are lovely little moments. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed Imagination. I'm happy you asked about that. I have a genuine story. It was good. It was raining in Southern California.
So that album was the end of Floetry. So I mean, obviously people didn't know the stuff going on between you and Marsha and the difficulties in recording and all that sort of stuff. So what actually happened? How did it actually come to an end?
I mean, I didn't know either. I mean, the difficulties in recording, I think these things just happen. It's not a really intricate story. I think it's quite, it's kind of music industry 101. The difference that we're talking about my journey. The thing is that there's a Marsha journey also with the Marsha's dreams and to go back and age and Liverpool and boom, boom, boom. And, you know, and I think for Marsha, I think she was kind of with the how do we make this thing go more mainstream, the different numbers. I think that was there. The Michael Jackson song, obviously a lot of people came. Now, it's really quite simple. Marsha went solo in 2005. She signed to Aftermath, Dr. Dre's label, and that was really how Floetry ended. There's not a, we were in Japan and we had an argument on stage and I stormed off, or, there's not a drugs and alcohol scandal. I wasn't stumbling, she wasn't stumbling. There isn't actually that. There's, at the beginning of 2006, Marsha signed a solo deal. And by the end of 2006, Floetry did their last performance at Birmingham at the Drum in December.
And did you know that was all in the making and everything, and that was going to happen?
I like to say that everything that happened during my experience of Floetry, I'd kind of seen the good, the bad, and the indifferent. So it's not a case of I was aware. I knew that Marsha didn't want to do Floetry anymore. Mm-hmm. I was aware of that. And so I knew that there was inevitability. Me, though, I think my thing was, I haven't been thinking about going solo at all.
So you weren't ready, basically? You weren't prepared?
Yeah. But then at the same time, in hindsight now, I mean, this was almost 10 years ago, I was ready for what was supposed to happen. And I think sometimes we get a little misled into this idea that, you become a recording artist and then your life is supposed to be like that every single day. You put an album out tomorrow and it's part of a journey still. You've still got life to live. You still got... So, I wasn't ready for the end, but the end was ready. So It was ready and it ended.
And that obviously started your own career, your solo career as the Floacist.
Yeah, in hindsight, I kind of see now that I had to almost manifest the genre that I would work in as a solo artist. So I think there's an understanding of what I do that was manifested through the group. But I never had solo music. I was never trying for solo music. If I didn't have another song come into my head after Marsha went solo, I wouldn't have been trying to do music. My first instinct was to go back to the poetry, which I never left. I was always going to poetry events during the time. Obviously not as frequently, but I was always writing, more so than just writing songs. Those things were still happening. Always wanted to have a book, always working on different ideas, one-woman show. But these are all my theatre and literally original ideas and dreams, So I had lots of ideas, always. That was always the thing. I think I also had to deal with people's process of understanding once it ended, what does that mean? There's still a lot of people now who don't know that Floetry, disbanded almost 10 years ago.
So you had a rebirth.
Yes, indeed.
as the Floacist. So how did you, then, and it was Shanachie you signed to, wasn't it?
Yes.
How did that all come about? What happened? Were you still in the States at the time?
I was in and out of the States. I would go into the States and just, do various things, all whilst trying to just figure out where everything was, where I was, just kind of center. As much as in hindsight, it's very easy to wrap things up. The end of 2006 was very stressful. So I was around, and then I kind of got to a point actually where I said, "This is cool, I get it. I wasn't trying to do music, so therefore it's okay. I'm really happy with what it was. It's fantastic. I'm fine." I remember being in meditation doing that. I said, "I'm cool. Let's get on with whatever is whatever." And the following day, Shanachie reached out and said that they were interested. They'd see me somewhere. I was jamming in DC with Mike Phillips, the fantastic saxophonist, jazz saxophonist. And I was jamming with him, and someone had seen me there, had mentioned them, and Danny over there did his research about myself, and it all worked. Shanachie, which actually is Gaelic for poet or bard.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So that was cool. Had to look that up, saw that and went, oh. Yeah, trying to figure out, like, I think that's a clue. I'll take it as well.
So you did. I mean, you did a track called Prophecy as well around that time.
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
was a bit of a break. I think the last Floetry album was 2005, and
Mm-hmm.
the first Floacist album was 2010.
That's right. Yeah.
So was that all going through the process of the rebirth, if you like, and then getting signed, and then you launched your solo career?
Yeah, I did numerous things. I realized that you can't always just operate by what you want. You know, sometimes when you want something, maybe the best thing to do is give. So I did other things. I came back and did some teaching at my old school. I interacted. Prophecy actually came from something I did called Spoken Soul, where I was in Baltimore and I worked with a few different poets and just kind of shared the floetic process with them, how I would structure a song and so on and so forth. And I made that. So yeah, those are all things in that process. And there were songs sometimes that I would record that would just be there.
on that first album, you had some incredible collaborations, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I had some fun on that first one. It's interesting because when I was signed, obviously, I was signed by Shanaka, which was lovely, but everyone kind of had this idea. A lot of people, I think, had the idea of trying to recreate Floetry, so trying to partner me with a vocalist of some sort. So when I sent the first couple of songs back, Flow Soul, I recorded in like 2 weeks. And I spent the first couple of songs, but they're saying, oh, who's singing on there? It's her. And they started to realise, because at first their idea was they wanted me to have a feature on every song, which I thought was funny because I knew they wouldn't pay for that. I knew that was just far too expensive of who the features were.
You did have Raheem Devon, Layla Hathaway,
absolutely.
Music Soul Child.
Fantastic, and that was great fun. Ra and I were the only ones who recorded in the studio together on that music. I sent the song out to Talib and I sent the song out to
Well, you did the
Layla
video
also.
together with the music, didn't you?
Yes.
Which is a great video.
Yes, we had fun. My first solo video, yeah.
And my favourite track on that album is Let Me. I just love Let Me.
I love that song too.
It's a great vibe to it and stuff.
It really it flowed. That album flowed in such a way, it was interesting. I didn't really realise that I didn't see myself as holding something back, but by the time I got to recording it, it was very swift. And Let Me is just very conversational, you know, and it really just flows. It's one of those songs that I just need to hear the first line and then the rest of it.
And an amazing video for that as well.
Thank you. That video
Very
is
beautiful video.
very enjoyable. Gosh, I just worked with some really amazing people. Duncan, my director of photography, just an absolute genius with light and what you can do in a small space, black space, and then
it's very artistic. It's very artistic.
Original 3+1 members in there, Nolan Weeks, and also Darwood Grace, who also produced the video too. Shot at home in England. It was.
Oh, was it shot here? Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Went back to the garden. Back to the garden. We depicted the Garden of Eden. There was actually a pastor in the States who did a whole sermon on it being a very devilish video, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's quite cool. Because he said that he watched it hundreds of times, and I just thought that was fun.
But it's had about 300,000 views on YouTube, so it's been very successful.
Lovely, yeah, I really like that.
But definitely check out that video, it's a fantastic video.
Thank you.
So then that moves on to the second album.
Yes.
So yeah, tell me about that.
Floetry Rebirth was, it really was to commemorate 10 years. It came out in 2012 and Floetic had come out in 2002. It was interesting. There was still, again, even on this particular part of my solo journey, there was some external energies that were really in the mind of trying to recreate, or I think we're in a bit more of a battle or a denial of the fact that Floetry had come to the space that it had. My ex-husband in particular, and just kind of the Marsha thing. So there was a bit of that energy there. But what was really nice was this album, we came back, worked with a fully British production company, and decided also to step away from MIDI and really recorded this one live instrumentation, upright bass, you know, which was beautiful, really enjoyable. My favourite experience on this album by far is the song with Thandiswa Mazwai. I absolutely love Thandiswa, Roots of Love, and I had wanted to do a song that dealt with a more ancient language than the English tongue, And for me as a poet, kind of getting to a point where sometimes I just want to be able to burst into another language, but I just don't know if it'll be understood. So it's fantastic, Tandisa, with the Osa. And then as an artist and just as a person, I felt very, very reflected and connected with her spirit and her thoughts, and it's not separate. It's not even a fad or anything. It's just how and who she is, her environment. It was fantastic. I really, really loved that experience making that song with her, Roots of Love, kind of bringing the diaspora
lyrically,
together.
it's a very deep album. I mean, it's called The Rebirth, I guess, to a certain extent anyway, but it's very deep. You only had Start Again there. And then again, my favourite track on that is Soul. I think that's an incredible track. So talk to me about Soul, because that's quite a powerful, lyrically, it's quite a powerful song.
It's very much, the album's full of mantras, really. As with kind of all my work, it's having a lot of questions and doing a lot about this Floetry end, which I think would have been a lot easier if Marsha had just said that she went solo, but she didn't. She said a lot of other things, and still does. Soul for me was more than just addressing where I was with the state, with Floetry. It was to do with articulating just kind of what my mantra is, how I move, you know, and also being able to be inclusive of those beings that I really pulled things back to, which is at my base is my mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister, you know, and the people. It's funny because I remember even when I was recording it, I was like, oh, this is so funny, because I already know, when I hear a song, what comes to me is what comes to me. I can hear a fantastic piece of music, but if it's not something I have something to put on, I don't force it. And what comes to me, usually that's it. It's not something that's really rewritten and reapproached. Like the whole idea of taking 10 months to make a song is very kind of different to me, unless you're really writing a piece of music arrangement. So I remember when I was recording the song, I just thought to myself, oh, this is like, people are going to hear this as like an answer song, you know. And I'm listening to it and I think this is so typically funny, because the beat and everything and just the way that everything moves and the vibration of the sound is smooth. Yeah. It's not. So I'm laughing thinking about Tupac's Hit 'Em Up and Soul, and doing the comparison, which was making me laugh. But you know, I also like that. But it's very much that. It's just speaking of the mantra and how I move and I mean,
it's not just the lyrics, the whole feeling of the song is very strong, it's very powerful emotionally. It's really...
And to be in soul music, that was the other thing I found quite funny when Floetry ended. I remember just thinking, but you know, it's a neo-soul, you know? I've chosen neo-soul. Am I getting is this a neo-soul beef? I can't, it doesn't go for me. So, yeah, I love the feeling of that song because it speaks onto the soul. I can't sell my soul, I can't.
And I guess that it's expressing what you've always done. You've remained very true to your art, and it's very clear what you're about. You haven't sort of been guided by other people or done other things. You've done what's you, and that really comes across. Yeah. So that brings us on to the latest album, Rise of the Phoenix, released early this year. So tell us about that. How are you feeling about that?
Rise of the Phoenix Mermaid. It's funny because you mentioned soul for the last album, and on the second verse of Soul, I say I went deep inside myself, which is very true. I did. I went very deep. It was very much an involution to try and understand certain things. And Rise of the Phoenix Mermaid, yes, it's an album title, but it really does speak to the era of life that I was in and am in at the time, which is being in the beginning when you know you've experienced an end. You know, so you know you've experienced an end, so now you're in this beginning place, which is quite interesting. I find that the final third or the final quarter of a cycle can feel like you're walking through just quicksand, you know. It just, the amount of times that you're like, okay, that's it now, I'm over that, I'm a different person, I've learned, I've grown, and then you're like, are you serious? I swear this thing is over, you know. So when you actually get to that place, I think you're walking for a little while, you're like, I think this is new. But it's a different new, because it's a new with experience.
It feels very celebrational.
oh, you celebrate lots of stuff. You celebrate the fact that you can pick your feet up without them being pulled. You know, you celebrate being. You celebrate that it's the past, you know? Not even so much wishing it didn't happen, but just celebrating that it's past, you know? And so this is what this title speaks on. It speaks on to a rise. Very much my studying, going introspective, I couldn't really deal with this external, trying to find happiness or peace or balance or alignment externally, because there's too much that can be drawn from that. So I'd gone internally, and by going internally, I learned about the duality that every individual is anyway. So before you even get into the partnering of other people, you know, there's this duality within yourself. The part of you that wants to do this, but the part of you that wants to do that. You know, and I started to look at trying to find some harmony there, not worrying about it outside, the harmony there. And, you know, that could be your left brain, your right brain, that could be your body and your soul, these different ways that we describe it. In this sense, it's the fire being and the water being I took the phoenix and the mermaid. The phoenix representing the baptisms of fire that we go through to grow. The mermaid representing more so an ancient kind of where we come from. So whether that's the water of the womb, whether that's the ocean before we come upon land. And these two very opposing elements that I wanted to create harmony from, and when you heat the water it rises. So this is the metaphysical, the quantum physics alignment of what that's about. But it really speaks onto the experience. There was a side of the way that Floetry had ended, that I had felt sacrificed. I'd felt that the brand had been sacrificed even, and it represented such a positive thing. But then I came again out of the subjective space into the objective space to look at what could this mean, what could come of it. And then I realized that I had to kind of find a way to gracefully be let down in public, you know? Happens sometimes. Mm-hmm. And in that whole journey, there now feels like a rise. So I went deep inside myself, and now it feels like I'm kind of coming back from that migration and that kind of pilgrimage, new and fresh, but not new, not a first beginning, it's another beginning. So it's a beginning with past behind it.
And so how are you feeling now? Now you're 3 albums in, I know you're signed to Shanachie, but you're effectively an independent artist. Mm-hmm. How are you finding this journey compared to the previous journey when you had all the madness of major labels and all the money and all that sort of stuff? How does it feel to you?
Well, what's great is I learned very early that I never had all the money, so that was cool.
They taught you very quickly. The money's not yours.
At no point did I have all the money.
I meant all the money investment in recording and all that sort of stuff.
It's great to see the difference and to know the difference. I mean, we were. I mean, for me, I was huge for a poet, but you know, we were never. Let's say in the space of, say, a Destiny Child. But that being said, we were at the same awards that Destiny Child were at, and we were within the elk of being nominated and awarded in this type of thing. Really, I have to honestly say, there was a point in my life where I knew I needed something to change, I needed something to give. And I think when you ask for change, you can't then get nitpicking when things do change. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but could you have not left this? Or could you, you know, and I'm also embracing the change. And I do feel that right now, I really enjoy where I am. You know, I have such a heightened appreciation for everything. You're coming out to have a conversation about this career, you know. The Jazz Cafe the other day, that when people gather, like at this point, when people gather, I see the choice, the option, and the alignment of how powerful a interaction that is, you know. I'm very grateful for releasing music. I'm very much at peace of not having, I'm not trying to outdo Floetry, so it's great. I don't see it separate. I don't feel like, you know, now I'm in my solo career. I have 6 products that I've released over the past, what are we now, 2014, over the past 12 years. That for me, I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like Dad, see? Six over 12 years, this music thing, I've been productive. But I feel like that. I also still feel there's so many things to do. I haven't even...
So what does the future hold?
Literature, my books. The 7-year-old in me is looking at me like that right now, like, okay, when are we actually going to do what we said we were going to do? So books, definitely.
Is that books as in poetry, or books as in fiction, or?
I definitely science fiction in particular, because I think that's the freest place to write about the possibility of things. Then I also have an affirmation book that I'm working on right now. I really want to promote the importance of journaling. I can't imagine myself without journaling. I already say things without thinking, so journaling, if I didn't have that, I don't know how I would align that. So yeah, there's that. There's also, I have a one-woman play that I'm working on. I'd love to get back into the theatre, which I just adore. And then loads of things that are really much more important than just, things that have got my name on it in this room listening to, but actually being really focused and productive and lending energy onto good causes and just productive alignments. I'm really into gardening right now, and I think there's something in there, gardening and poetry, that I think there's more for me to share and do and be aware of and be a part of, and my family, just that 6, 7, or that 10 years where I was away from my family. I came to see my family as the break, and I was away for work, was really much more draining on me than I realized at the time, because I was in a very audacious kind of energy, so in hindsight. So just being able to make that switch, which I've done now, that's my favorite. So now I'm with my family and I go away to work, wherever away is, whether away is down the road or whether away is overseas. I like that. That to me is good living, because I have an idea of longevity. I'm really not looking to just blow it. It's a long road. I'm 35. I'm almost able to be of the age where I can actually maybe share my opinion.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your opinion today. And whatever you do, please keep making the music.
Okay, I will.
Natalie Stewart, the Floacist, Mi-Soul.
Never saw myself rolling without your friend. Now you wanna go